Caledonian elixir. From Glasgow, Scotland, welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host, Vincent, and we are on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter X, and Rumble. Looks like that intro played twice there for a moment. Does that play twice? I think that played twice there. Also, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and follow button wherever you find us. It helps the show out, and I do appreciate it. So, welcome back. But if you're finding us for the first time, we're a podcast that covers everything from politics to the paranormal, told with wit and true grit. And unless you've been living recently with your head in the sand, you have noticed that the world looks like it's a stage set for an apocalyptic showdown. And there is global war being waged from the ruins of Chasiv Yar, Donbass to the rubble of Gaza. World powers such as the US, Russia, Israel, Iran, Ukraine are all at war with effects such as instability, unprecedented streams of migrants, destruction, and megadeath. Now, involved in all of this is the man in the White House, or Mar-a-Lago, depending on how he feels. I think the US president, well, I've changed my view on him. I think he's now unstable, possibly mad. We've seen his truth socials threatening to destroy an entire civilization recently. Still, there are those who believe he's more of an unorthodox genius. Well, to discuss this and more is my guest, Constantin von Hoffmeister. He is a journalist, political analyst, and author of Esoteric Trumpism. So, without further ado, Constantine.
I appreciate it.
Hello, can you hear me, Constantine?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, can you tell me something? Did that intro run twice at the start there?
Yeah, actually, the whole thing ran once, and then it appeared again twice after that, but only for a couple of seconds.
Right. Okay. I've got a new producer helping me out for the first time. So if there are a couple of gremlins or errors, it's not my fault. Don't blame me.
No, that's
Don't
fine.
blame, don't blame Constantine either. He's like a guest. He's doing his best. Blame her. So Constantine, I read you work for Arctos Journal, an outfit of Arctos Publishing House.
Yeah, I don't work for Arctos anymore. I quit working
Right.
for Arctos last year in September. I have my own publishing house now called Multipolar Press.
Right.
Yeah, I just published the last book was Ultra Heavy by Tim Kirby, the most famous American in Russia. It's a traditionalist, like Eurasianist science fiction novel with multipolar allegories, Warhammer 40,000 style. Then I also published two translations of Oswald Spengler. One is an abridgment of The Decline of the West, because as you know, Spengler's magnum opus is massive. It's like 1,200 pages in 2 volumes, the original. And I cut it down to 250 pages with like bridge paragraphs between the different sections and a massive number of footnotes that explain like different terms that appear in the text that might be unclear to contemporary readers. Also added a preface that puts the work into a modern perspective. And I published Heraclitus, which was Spengler's doctoral thesis about the Greek philosopher and his idea of the eternal becoming, that everything is always in flux and nothing stays the same. And yeah, and of course, I also published one of my own books, is Multipolar Galaxy, Star Wars as a Myth of Civilizational Rebirth, where I basically explore George Lucas's vision and put them into the context of the emerging multipolar world. So basically, the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequels, I ignore all the Disney sequels because they're blasphemy, basically.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything about that, but they are not very good at all. I read several authors published by Arctos, for example, Dugan, Giorgiani, Horace, Homi, Havwali. Don't know if my pronunciation's correct there, but real knockout authors, man. So, yeah, it's a publishing house I really respect. Before we get into the weeds, can you break down your background, essentially who you are and how you got involved in journalism and political analysis?
Well, I was born in Germany in 1976. I lived in Germany until I was 15, and then I left Germany, moved to the United States, went to high school in different states in Arizona and other places. Went to university in New Hampshire for a year, Keene State College. At the same time, when the movie Jumanji with Robin Williams was filmed in the same town. So I'm actually an extra in the movie. You can see me in the background in one of the scenes. That was in 1994, I believe. Yeah. So I was in New Hampshire for a year. Then I moved to New Orleans. In New Orleans, I stayed for 7 years, went to the University of New Orleans. I studied English literature and political science. So basically got my bachelor's in literature and my master's in political science. I stayed in the US, like traveling around different states, like doing translation work because everything was online, so I wasn't tied to an office or anything. And yeah, basically just visited different people, different experiences. Afterwards, I moved to Russia, to Moscow, where I got acquainted with Alexander Dugin through an American friend of mine who was living in Moscow at the same time, doing work for Alexander Dugin, managing the English version of Alexander Dugin's website. So that was in 2005, yeah. So over 20 years ago, and Dugin was really unknown at the time. Yes, he was like a total fringe figure. I mean, both in the West and in Russia,
Mm.
not well known at all. But while I was still in America, I had become fascinated with Dugin's idea of Eurasianism and also National Bolshevism, which was very popular and hip at the time. So I became very interested in these topics, and that was actually the reason why I moved to Russia in the first place, just to meet the different spokespeople of these ideologies and ideas. And through the American guy, I met Alexander Dugin. And Alexander Dugin was at that time organizing the founding conference of the Eurasianist youth movement in the town of Alexandrov, which is about 2 hours from Moscow. It also has a Kremlin. It's mostly famous because Ivan Grozny, or Ivan the Terrible, as he's known in English, the Russian Tsar, he moved his court from the Kremlin in Moscow to the Kremlin in Alexandrov for various reasons. And Dugin wanted to organize this conference in the throne room of Ivan the Terrible in the Kremlin of Alexandrov. And my American friend was already invited as a speaker. And I suppose my American friend suggested to Dugin that it would be cool to have more international speakers. So I was also invited to speak there. So it was super cool because I was able to speak in front of Ivan the Terrible's throne, and in the background they had a screen where they were playing Sergei Eisenstein's movie about Ivan the Terrible without sound, just for the atmosphere. So it was yeah, it was really nice. So I spoke about German-Russian friendship, a German-Russian alliance, uh, mentioning the Ernst Sneakish, the German National Bolshevik ideologue from the Weimar Republic, who at the time had already supported an alliance between sort of revive nationalist Germany and the Soviet Union to create a sort of like imperial structure to counter the capitalist powers of Great Britain and the United States. Unfortunately, he fell afoul of the Nazis and was imprisoned by the Nazis and only liberated by the Soviets in 1945. And well, after the war, of course, he was not very influential anymore. First, he lived in East Germany and tried to sort of revive his ideas of National Bolshevism. And he actually wanted to rename the German Democratic Republic officially to Prussia. Yes, because he thought that that East Germany, communist East Germany, was a direct successor state to Prussia in terms of its like Spartan ideals, its militaristic spirit, and also its sort of glorification of German traditions that harken back to Martin Luther and the peasant revolts of the Middle Ages. Well, it was rejected, of course, the idea, and the German Democratic Republic did not change its name to Prussia. But so this is the kind of stuff I talked about during my speech at the Dugin conference in the town of Alexandrov. And I also mentioned that it was always the goal of Britain and later the United States to basically drive a wedge between Germany and Russia, because Germany and Russia combined would be a tremendous continental power. Like,
Oh, yeah, you've got the industry of Germany and the energy of Russia. And
well, that was the idea. Like, and well, there were a lot of people that had the idea. Well, you have like the technological know-how of Germany, and you have the almost unlimited vast resources, natural resources of Russia combined would be basically unbeatable. Would be a super empire and be a serious rival to Great Britain and the United States. And of course, they couldn't have it. So, I mean, they engineered all kinds of things to prevent this from happening. And I would say very successfully, obviously, right? Because it never happened. And
it's that divide and conquer strategy that the British and succeeding the British, the Americans have, practiced successfully, quite successfully.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon, obviously, with the state of affairs right now. I mean, even Putin himself several years ago, like before the falling out with the West, talked about the idea of this crater Europe from Dublin to Vladivostok. It's like a common civilizational space. I mean, there have been many thinkers that have envisioned such a structure, but unfortunately, it has never come to fruition because of American interference and the so-called transatlantic alliance between Germany.
I dare say Anglo-American interference, because I can't see the English in particular being very accepting of that Eurasian Union.
No, of course. I mean, yeah, of course, the English are part of it. I just focus on the Americans now because the Americans are now the actual power, right? And the English are more America's lapdog, so to speak. Yes, I mean, they never really go against American interests at all. I mean, even now in the conflict with Iran, I mean, they have like mildly criticized it, but they still allowed the Americans to use infrastructure in Britain for their attacks on Iran, which basically makes them a party, right?
I want to turn this subject because you're raising Dugin and the geopolitical, conflicts that are raging in the world today, and we've got that geopolitical quagmire that is enveloping the Middle East, sending, those shockwaves across the world. So, how did we go from? And I asked this in my last live debate, and you would have heard the participants' response. But I want to ask you. How did we go from negotiations in Oman between the US and Iran 2 months ago to all-out war?
Well, I think it was obviously at the behest of Israel, and they've pretty much admitted it several times because Israel really wanted to attack, and then the US, because it is so closely tied to Zionist interests, had no choice but to join the attack, right? The surprise attack, which happened during the negotiations. So, I mean, it was a very treacherous thing if you think about it. And I don't really understand, like, why the Iranians now are even willing to participate in another round of negotiations, because this is like the third time. Because the first two times they were attacked during the negotiations, because it wasn't, I mean, last year was the same, right? And then this year again. And it was completely unprovoked, the attack, in my opinion, because Iran posed no threat to the United States whatsoever, no matter what Trump says, or no matter what the Americans are saying. It's completely ludicrous, and I think everybody can see that it's ludicrous. I mean, these weird accusations that they're making. I mean, they don't really have a reason, right? It's not even clear, like, to the average citizen, the average American citizen, why his government attacked Iran. So we have like weird justifications, like J.D. Vance saying that, like, they had to prevent Iranian terrorists from blowing themselves up with like nuclear suicide vests in American supermarkets. You know, it's just totally ridiculous. But that's where we are.
And you've got the reason that they were, attempting to enrich uranium to a level where they could create a nuclear bomb. But you've got Grossi, the director of the IAEA, disputing that. You've got the DNI director, Tulsi Gabbard, also disputing it. So
Well, Netanyahu has been saying for over 20 years that Iran is weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. It's not a new thing. And that's obviously not the reason, because everybody was saying, like, all the experts are now saying that Iran was nowhere close to developing a nuclear weapon. Not to mention that the Ayatollah that was murdered during the attack was also vehemently against his country developing a nuclear bomb, because it supposedly went against Islamic principles. So I
yeah,
mean, you know,
fatwa.
so there was. I think that's totally bogus. I mean, this reason that they're presenting is totally ridiculous, and I think a lot of people can see that it's just completely made up. And it's basically about Israel wanting to take out its rivals in the region, because, as Netanyahu himself said a few days ago, Israel wants to become the true regional power, and Iran is the biggest competitor, and that's why Israel is so focused on Iran. It basically wants Iran out of the picture as serious competition.
Yeah, and you're alluding to that ceasefire, and who do you think the ceasefire benefits the most? America or Israel or Iran in the axis of resistance? The Houthis and Hezbollah.
You mean the current ceasefire, right? I mean the
Yeah,
one that
the,
is,
the, cur- the current ceasefire, the very fragile ceasefire that
well,
is
yeah. Well,
48.
right now, I don't think we even have a ceasefire now, right? Because the Pakistanis, the mediators, they specifically said that Lebanon is included in the ceasefire, and both Iran and the Americans agreed to these conditions. But then, of course, as you know, Israel has been attacking Lebanon for the past several days, and quite brutally so. They've already killed like hundreds of civilians. I mean, these attacks in the last few days, since the ceasefire supposedly came into effect, have been more vicious even than the attacks before the
Mm.
ceasefire. And Iran, of course, is understandably upset. They're saying, well, it's completely unacceptable because, as agreed, Lebanon, not attacking Lebanon is part of the ceasefire terms. And then, of course, you had J.D. Vance saying, when he was being asked about this, he said, well, Lebanon is not included. And if the Iranians don't want to negotiate because of Lebanon, they're stupid. Yes.
Mm.
And then Trump said, "Oh, it's another skirmish with Lebanon. Has nothing to do with what was going on." But of course, Iran disagrees and says, "Well, uh, the Lebanese are our brothers, and whatever happens to them, basically, is happening to us, and we have to stand together, and therefore we will not accept it, and we will not uh, start the negotiations until Israel stops its attack on Lebanon." And while Iran has said several times that the United States should rein in Israel somehow. But then I think it's not even possible, because the question is like, is the United States even capable of reigning in Israel? Because who's the master and who's the servant here? Is the United States the master? Is Israel the servant? Or is it the opposite? It's not quite clear. I think it's rather the opposite, because I mean, the United States attacked another country completely unprovoked, not for the interests of the United States, but for the interests of a foreign state, and that foreign state is Israel. So it seems to me like the United States is almost like Israel's henchman, so to speak,
Mhm.
and is therefore not even capable of reigning in Israel. And I think the United States knows it, and that's why they're now pretending or trying to argue that Lebanon was never part of the ceasefire, even though it was, because they've published the tweets that the Pakistanis released
I
after
think I
the
think
ceasefire was
the
agreed.
I think the Israelis and the Americans have very cleverly put Iran in a corner here. Because if Iran now turns up to the negotiations in Pakistan this weekend, in spite of the continued attacks against the Lebanon by Israel, it almost looks like Iran is turning its back on their allies.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with you, because I mean, from what I've read, the Iranians have said that they will not even go to the negotiations until Israel stops. And so far, Israel hasn't stopped, and the negotiations haven't started yet. And they're actually supposed to start today, from what I've heard. And the Iranians are still unwilling to participate. So I don't know. I'm optimistic, because I think Iran has the upper hand, and I think they want to participate in these negotiations, even though they have to deal with the treacherous Americans again,
Mhm.
because they want America to officially sanction, or actually officially accept, Iran's new role, especially concerning the Strait of Hormuz. Because Iran, of course, is now saying that the Strait of Hormuz is basically ours. We control it. We can levy a toll. We can make money from it. We can decide who passes and who doesn't. It's not a free passage anymore, as it was before the war. And I think the Iranians want the United States to officially accept this, so the Iranians have a sort of quote unquote legal basis to deal with other nations like that rely on the Strait of Hormuz. I think that's what the Iranians get out of it, and it's very positive for Iran, of course. And I think Iran has approved itself to be a world power in its own right, because it has basically defeated the United States. I mean, Trump threatened, as you said earlier, to wipe out an entire civilization with his ultimatum.
Mhm.
If Iran doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz immediately, you bastards, in his deranged tweet.
Yeah, yeah.
But in just 1 hour before the ultimatum ran out, they came to an agreement all of a sudden. But the Strait of Hormuz is still not open. It's still closed as we're speaking. Yes, I mean they never opened it. So and that was like the third or fourth ultimatum that Trump chickened out of. The Taco Tuesday.
Uh,
Trump always chickens out. I mean, who can take Trump seriously now, and who can take the Americans serious? They've
but
basically
that,
revealed
that,
themselves as a paper tiger almost.
but it's true. How can you take them seriously? And it's obvious that it was the Americans, the Trump administration, that was sending out peace feelers trying to get a
Yeah, yes,
ceasefire for
yes.
some time. So why would the Iranians once again fall for a ceasefire? Because every time they negotiate with the Americans, they are attacked. And we know that in the 12-day war last year, the Israelis were running out of interceptors. So it made no sense in my mind for Iran to agree to a ceasefire, and yet they have.
Yeah, well, I thought, well, the only reason, as I said, that I can think of is because Iran wants to have it on paper that they are now in charge of the Strait of Hormuz, because that's what it's all about now. It's the Strait of Hormuz, obviously. And if they are officially in charge, and even the United States accepts it, then other countries, like Japan and South Korea, are much more willing to accept the state of affairs than if it's just unilateral from Iran's side. I think this is the main reason the Iranians agreed, in my opinion.
So you think this has to do with commerce and some form of reparations being extracted through passing through the Straits of Hormuz?
Yes, absolutely, definitely, for sure. I
Right.
mean, it's 20% of the world's energy that goes through the strait, and if Iran is in charge of it, they have enormous leverage and enormous global standing. I mean, it's total victory for Iran, in my opinion.
We've seen what happens in Gaza over and over again, with the Israeli technique of mowing the lawn, where they go back in, flatten the place, and then a year later they do the same thing again. And in my opinion, a ceasefire benefits the Americans and the Israelis more than it does Iran. And after the midterms, I can just see the Americans going right back in again because, of course, the longer this conflict drags on, the more Trump has to lose because you have the election in 6 months' time. Um, and if both houses of Congress goes to the Democrats, you could definitely see something like another impeachment happening. And then you've seen how the global economy has been shaken by the fact that the Iranians have seized traffic through the strait. Um, so I think this is a big mistake by the Iranians, and regardless of whether they have a piece of paper that is giving them accountability, international recognition of control over the strait, that's not going to stop the Americans and the Israelis returning next February, say March, and finishing the job.
Well, I completely agree with you. I would have advised the Iranians against it myself. I just think this is the reason or the reasoning of the Iranians. But we don't know if the ceasefire is even going to hold. We don't know if there will even be any negotiations or if hostilities won't immediately break out again after the negotiations or even during. So, I mean, everything can happen, basically. I mean, it's all possible. And as Sergei Lavrov said once, the Russian foreign minister, he said that the United States is agreement incapable. And this is absolutely true. And this is mostly because of the bipolar American political system. And I mean bipolar in a clinical sense, because you have like one administration, like for example, I don't know, Biden for 4 years. And then after that, you have another administration, Trump. And sometimes the interests are diametrically opposed. And I mean, Trump ripped up the agreement that Obama made with Iran because
Mhm.
Obama already had an agreement with Iran, which was sort of functioning regarding the nuclear capabilities and so on. But Trump didn't like it, so he ripped it up. So how
Mhm.
can you even make any agreement with the United States? Because apparently, if you make an agreement with the United States, you're not actually making an agreement with the United States. You're just making an agreement with the current administration. And there's absolutely zero guarantee that the succeeding administration will honor it at all, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of precedent. There are a lot of precedents that this is not the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I do, and I would actually like to get into this with you a little later on regarding the different techniques of each administration, because I recently watched a podcast that you were on previously, and you made some comments regarding vis-a-vis the Trump administration and the Biden administration and the differences thereof. And I would like to address some of the comments you made. However, first of all, there's a clip I would like to play, and I thought this clip is quite insane. You know, I've never seen a clip.
And I don't think it gets much more hostile than Iran. They're capable fighters. They're very tough people. And there are others like that. You don't mind when the enemy is weak, but that enemy is strong. Not so strong like they were about a month ago, I can tell you. In fact, right now, they're not too strong at all, in my opinion, but we're soon going to find out, aren't we?
Well, yeah, that's a surreal image. Could be from I don't know, some image of a person having taken too many mushrooms or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just the fact that he's discussing something so serious and he's got the Easter Bunny beside him, the timing couldn't be any more wrong. But you know what? I'd also like to read something from Alexander Dugin. And I want to get your opinion of this quote. He said that the 21st century will be defined by the conflict between the Eurasianists and the Atlanticists, and that the Eurasianists defend the need for every people on Earth to be allowed to determine its own way, free from interference and opposition of the Atlanticists. They stand for ultra liberalism and stopping at nothing to expand their influence to every corner of the globe, unleashing terror and war. First, do you agree with that quote?
Well, of course I agree. Yes, because you have the liberal world order was the unipolar power since the early 1990s. Because I would say that after 1945, after the end of World War II, you had the Cold War, you had the bipolar world order where you had two poles. You had the Soviet Union and you had the United States. And basically all other countries either gathered around the United States, the quote unquote free West, or they gathered around the Soviet Union, the socialist East. Yes, so you had two poles, two sovereign poles. Then, of course, the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s. And then all of a sudden, Russia was super weak for a while, and you only had one pole, which was the United States. So United States was not just a superpower, as it was before when you had the Soviet Union as a superpower and the United States as a superpower. Like the United States then became a hyperpower because it was completely unchallenged. It was the only pole. That's why you had the unipolar moment. And the unipolar moment is now ending. Like we're in the middle of the process of emerging multipolarity because you have now emerging state civilizations that are asserting their right to police their own sphere of influence, like the Russian Federation or China, and to some extent India. So I would argue that right now we have several state civilizations. We have a state civilization is basically an empire. It's a civilization because it shares a common culture and common traditions, but it is also united in a state. That's why it's a state civilization. Like an empire, you have the United States, you have the Russian Federation, you have China, and you have India. These are the four state civilizations at the moment. Yes, I think Iran might still be counted as a state civilization as well, as it has proven itself in the last several weeks. For example,
Right. Sorry, go on, finish your point.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to argue like Islam, for example. Like Islam, I would say is that you have the Islamic civilization. It's a civilization because you have the Islamic tradition, like the Quran, the teachings of the Prophet, and it unites like hundreds and millions of people, but they're not united in one single state. Yes, that's why, I mean, they're fractured. That's why you have Iran as an Islamic state, but then you have all the Gulf states that are basically still in the unipolar camp, in the Western camp.
Mhm.
in the American camp, so to speak. It's disunited. And I would say it's the same in Latin America. They're not really united, because if Latin America was united, then I think they would have not managed to kidnap Maduro so easily.
Mm.
Well, that's how it is. And I think liberalism is the guiding ideology of the Western hegemon, like the United States and its allies or its satraps. And liberalism, to some extent, is basically white supremacism. It's like in the past, you had the British Empire, like I don't know, 19th century. You had Rudyard Kipling, for example. Yes, he wrote the famous poem "White Man's Burden." Yes, where he basically argued that British civilization is the greatest civilization on the planet, and it has the moral obligation almost to civilize the lesser races, the savages, so to speak. I mean, this was the guiding ideology of the British Empire. And I think now you have the United States and you have the European Union, and they're not overtly like, I don't know, white supremacist or racist anymore as they used to be in the past. But I think it's just a continuation of the same with a different mask, because now they're basically saying that the West has the only true values like capitalism, democracy, quote unquote, the rule of law, and all
Mm.
that nonsense. Yes, and gay rights, transgender rights, and all the other perversions. And the West thinks that any society that rejects these values is somehow inferior. And it is, again, the West's moral obligation to impose its values on these societies, whether they want it or not, for the benefit of them. So it's the same kind of mentality that Rudyard Kipling had, right? Because I mean, nobody the British imperialists, they didn't ask the Indians, for example, or the Africans, whether they wanted to be subjugated by the British for their own good. Yes, the British just assumed it's just for the good of the Indians and the Africans, and it's the same today. So they attack Afghanistan, claiming it's for women's rights, or even with Iran, like some commentators in the Trump camp made the argument it's for the gays in Iran, so they're not thrown off the roofs anymore. And again, it's white supremacist or Western supremacist attitude. I mean, it's basically
Again, another example of that is the Opium Wars with China and how that was sold back.
yeah, exactly, opium wars. My
Free market and
Yeah,
trade.
exactly. My great grandfather, he was a lieutenant general in for the Germans in the Boxer Rebellion in China. Actually, it was quite interesting. I have some black and white photographs at home here because he had like 3,000 men under him in China, and had a lot of like the ringleaders that he caught of the Boxer rebels. He had them beheaded, executed, and took photographs of the beheadings, and I still have them here. That's quite
Wait, sorry, who exactly were the Boxer rebels?
The Boxer rebels were basically the people that were opposed to the Western imperialists that were imposing their presence on the Chinese mainland against the will of the Chinese people. Yes. And they're called the Boxer rebels because apparently it started in like boxing clubs in China. It was like young men, and then they all organized and became a very, I don't know, substantial force, because you had like an international coalition of Western states plus Japan that sort of intervened in China to crush this Boxer rebellion, which was fighting for Chinese sovereignty, essentially.
Yeah. So you agree with Dugan's analysis summarized by that?
Yeah, 100%, of course. I mean, you can even look at it in eschatological terms. It's basically the forces of light versus the forces of darkness. Because I mean, I used to laugh at it when people said the West is satanic. But I mean, looking at the West's actions, I mean, it truly is satanic. I mean, there's really no other word to describe it sometimes. I mean, just look at what happened on the first day of the attack on Iran. They bombed the girls' school and killed like 180 schoolgirls. just massacred them. And apparently, maybe it was an accident, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But there was never an apology, or they never even admitted it, nor did they apologize for it. It's completely outrageous.
And the fact that
Despicable.
President Trump followed up 40 days later saying that he would wipe out their entire civilization makes you consider that maybe it wasn't an accident. You know, when your leader uh, is saying that an entire civilization is going to die, and in the first day of the war, a girls' school is bombed with 170, 180 children and killed, it makes you think, was it done accidentally? You know,
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
That's my question, right? And the fact that they never apologized or even admitted that they did it. I mean, first they even try to blame Iran, like they're saying, well, Iran did it with a Tomahawk missile. They have Tomahawk missiles. Trump said it's complete bullshit, obviously. Yeah, I mean, the New York Times actually had an article about this, and they said, I mean, they presented like a hypothetical scenario where they said, imagine Iran had some military presence in Mexico and they had fired like a missile at California, wanting to target some US military base but hit some elementary school instead. I mean, can you just imagine the coverage of this in world and global media? It would never end. Yes. Or imagine the Russians had done something like this in Ukraine. They would talk about it for years. But this happened. It was mentioned in Western media, but just like a little note. And it was always framed like Iran claims that the US attacked elementary school. You know, it's always how they frame it, which basically made it sound like Iran made it up, and it's maybe not even true, even though it is true. I mean, it's an established fact now, but it's already forgotten. It's already down the memory hole. Nobody talks about it in the West.
So, Constantine, correct me if I'm wrong. You describe a world that is divided into several poles, and you also think that first, you agree with that, but you think the world is divided into several poles, yes?
Yes.
Do you also think that the Trump administration and or MAGA embrace and recognize this reality that the world is now divided into several poles? That it's a multipolar world?
I think they recognize it. At least the I would say the elite in MAGA, the smart people, they recognize it. They've talked about it. Like Marco Rubio said several months ago that we're basically in a multipolar world now. And J.D. Vance gave a speech at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, where he also said that Americans have to get used to a changing world. Americans have to get used to a world in which America is not the dominant power anymore. So he also implicitly admitted in this speech that we're now in a multipolar world. So they know very well that we're in a multipolar world.
Right. I've heard this from many Russians in the media, including Dugin, who said we have a foothold in Trumpism and we should support the American pole of the Great Awakening. Right. Now, I'll be honest, Constantine, I dispute this, and I think this is wishful thinking of Dugan's part and anyone else who thinks that, right? I think Trump supports American globalization. I think he supports American global governance. That involves supporting American monopolies, the global financial oligarchy, that integrates itself into every territory on earth, right? And both Biden and Trump support American hegemony and that same global financial oligarchy. And I just see it like this, that the White House, the State Department represents a political wing that uses diplomatic tools to accomplish its goals. And then if those goals aren't accomplished by the political wing, they send in the military wing, right? I just think that's the case under Trump, Biden, Obama, Bush, regardless of what administration it is. The bureaucracies serve the administrations advancing American globalism, American hegemony, and they've just got different approaches to it. you know, you've got Trump who speaks about MAGA, you know, and a lot of people assume or think that he accepts a multipolar world. I don't think Trump accepts a multipolar world, and I think the evidence in the last 13 months doesn't show that he accepts a multipolar world.
I'm in 100% agreement with you, because when I stated earlier that, say, Marco Rubio and Vance stated that we're now in a multipolar world, Trump was always the force that was against the multipolar world. I mean, Dugin talked about this as well. He was always resisting the multipolar world, but through his actions accelerated the rise of the multipolar world, sort of like Mephistopheles in Goethe, the German poet. In his play Faust, you have the character of Mephistopheles, and Mephistopheles in Faust is described as the force that always wants to do bad, but always ends up doing good. Yes, and I think it is sort of similar with Trump. Yes, because Trump, as you said correctly, he wants to reassert American hegemony. He wants to prevent the emergence of the multipolar world. He wants to prevent dollar dominance. He wants to keep the status quo of the West as the dominating power in the world. And I think this is also why, for example, he sent Marco Rubio to the Munich Security Conference, when Marco Rubio gave his speech to the Europeans about the importance of protecting Western civilization, the greatest civilization that ever existed, and whitewashing imperialist Western crimes, colonial crimes, and appealing to the Europeans to a sort of solidarity between the United States and the Europeans, because, as he said, Rubio, in a speech, the United States is a child of Europe. Yes, so we're all in the same boat. And I think this was part of the strategy, because Trump can only assert American hegemony with allies, with other states that support this endeavor. And I think this is why he sent Rubio to give this speech. And I think, to some extent, quite successful, because you have the Rutte, the NATO chief. He basically just said that Trump is right to be angry, that NATO didn't participate, it didn't help the United States in this war of aggression, and we can make up for it. Soon we can get engaged in the Middle East. It will just take a while. So he always basically excuses the imperialist ambitions of Trump, which basically makes NATO an imperialist project in itself, which it always was. Obviously, I mean, just look at what happened in Yugoslavia. I mean, we all know that NATO is not just a defense organization. It is an organization that wants to project power and realize imperialist ambitions. And so Trump desperately wants US hegemony, but he's not going to get it. And I think he destroyed MAGA with his attack on Iran. I mean, MAGA is completely finished. Just yesterday, he went on like a completely insane rant in this gigantic block of text where he denounced like Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, and a bunch of other people. I mean, the people that basically got him elected, that helped him get elected, his biggest supporters. He just denounced them as low IQ fools because they don't support him in his imperialist war of aggression, because they supported Trump, the peace president, like Tulsi Gabbard, when she basically switched from the Democrats to the Republicans to support Trump, because she thought the Democrats would mean war and Trump would mean peace. Well, now the opposite is the case. And
I don't know how she can still stay in her position.
Yeah, that's the same question.
Trump said he was asked about, Iran having or developing nuclear weapons. And the journalist told him, well, your own DNI, Director of National Intelligence, said that Iran isn't or hasn't made the decision whether or not to go for a nuclear weapon. And then he just said that she's wrong. How she can stay in her role with Trump saying that is beyond me. I'm bewildered by that.
Yeah, no, same. I've asked myself the same question many times, and it's just very odd. Well,
So do you think so? You're drawing a distinction between Rubio, Trump, and Vance, and to
no,
me,
absolutely not. No, I don't,
not.
because I mean they're all in the same camp, obviously, especially now, because I don't see any real resistance from Rubio and Vance. I mean, just because Rubio and Vance argued that we're now in a multipolar world doesn't mean they like it. And I think Trump is the driving factor here. And well, Vance, as the vice president, at least in public, has to agree with the president's decisions. We don't really know what Vance thinks in private about all this. And I think Rubio is probably behind it. It just seems to be in character for me. And like I said, Trump has basically destroyed MAGA with his attack on Iran because America clearly lost the conflict. Iran is clearly winning. And Trump is desperate. There's no off-ramp for him. So that's why he came up with this idea of peace negotiations and possibly agreeing with a lot of Iran's demands, which in the end will make Iran much stronger than it was before, and America much weaker in the region, especially if one of the points in Iran's 10-point proposal comes true, meaning that Americans are actually going to have to leave the Middle East altogether, which is...
You say that. You say that as well, and you attended Trump's inauguration, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I wasn't watching.
You were a supporter of Trump getting elected.
Yeah, totally.
When there was that attempted assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania, and you saw the blood trickling down his head and the American flag billowing in the background, that was a powerful image. And anyone who saw that, I respected his courage in that moment, and I knew that he was going to win that election. Not just because Biden seemed demented and cognitively impaired, but that was the moment of the election. That was the image of the election. Trump rising and shouting, "Fight, fight, fight!" And you too wanted Trump to be re-elected. And I watched that podcast where I heard you say you attended the inauguration. So, how has your views changed in regards to Trump?
Well, they've completely changed because, like I said, Trump has betrayed MAGA and he ruined his legacy. And I think he ruined his presidency. And even if he doesn't get impeached, if he doesn't get removed from office, I mean, a lot of people are saying the 25th Amendment should be invoked because Trump is clearly not well mentally. I mean, clinically speaking, he's somehow deranged, the things he says. And sometimes he says like two contradictory statements in the same speech. And it's quite sad. And the state of affairs cannot continue like this. And like I said, even if he doesn't get removed, I think the Republicans will be crushed in the midterms, and he will basically be a lame duck anyway. He will have gambled it all away, and all for Israel, not for the benefit of the United States. And well, I supported Trump because, like many other people, like Alex Jones, Tulsi Gabbard, I believe that he was sincere about wanting peace and not getting involved in more useless wars. But apparently he was not sincere, as we can see. He's very much beholden to the war party, much more than to the rational party. Like he's now completely enthralled of the neoconservatives and not of the paleoconservatives who are opposed to America's foreign entanglements, like the Patrick Buchanan types, the reasonable types. So yeah, it is a total shift. Like Trump totally changed, as many people said. He's not the same man anymore. He's like a different person now. So he cannot be supported in any shape or form. I think he's finished politically.
The difference is I agree with you in that he portrayed himself as not a dove, but as someone that didn't support these regime change operations, these wars in the Middle East. And he also, in addition to that, portrayed himself as someone who wanted to negotiate with Russia. Now, I recently, you saw that episode I had Jim Jatras and several others on debating Trump and the conflict. And we spoke about American-Russian relations under Trump, and we both agreed that the negotiations with Ukraine and Russia was a deception. So I want you to consider this, right? Since Trump was re-elected, Russia's allies have been falling like dominoes. We have seen Maduro, for example, in Venezuela, Assad in Syria, the Ayatollah also killed, and that conflict in Iran is still ongoing. You know, it's I don't think this ceasefire is going to amount to much at all. Um, so I think it's far from done. And if the Iranian government collapses, that is not going to help Russia one, I know at all. Uh, so if Iran falls under the weight of American bombs and sanctions, it's not going to benefit Russia. Then I also said that if you remember in Trump's first term, Trump took out Soleimani, right? And then since his second term began, in just 14 months, he's taken out Maduro, the Ayatollah. We see, you know, the regime and the government in Cuba collapsing because there's that blockade in Cuba. So Trump has this MO, right, where he likes to take out senior military and political figures. But we also had another attack recently against a world leader, and it was in December in Valdai, at Putin's residence, using a drone. Now, considering the Ukrainians don't have the space-based infrastructure to coordinate such an attack, what do you think of the notion that Trump was involved in that attack?
Well,
Um,
it's absolutely possible. And as you said, the Ukrainians don't have the know-how to even pull off an operation like this. It's the same with like the storm shadows, like those British missiles that routinely get fired into Russian territory. I mean, the argument is often made that Britain has to be behind it. They have to be controlling these missiles because the Ukrainians themselves are not capable of it, which
mm,
obviously makes Britain a war party. I mean, it's been a war party for a while. And yeah, I think obviously, yeah, it's completely possible that Trump could have known about the attack on Putin's residence. And it could also be possible that the Americans were behind it, maybe together with the British. Who knows? And I think Trump was never really serious about peace negotiations with Russia. I mean, again, at first, I was quite optimistic at first, especially when they met in Alaska, in Anchorage. I was like, wow, that's great, Putin, Trump, like making peace, because the only two parties that actually matter in this conflict in Ukraine are the Russian Federation and the United States. I mean, the Europeans don't really matter because they're not really sovereign anymore. And Ukraine obviously doesn't matter because it has zero sovereignty. So it is actually really a proxy war between the United States and Russia. And it should be settled by these two parties. And first, I thought Trump was sincere and they would settle it because they had all these promising meetings where they were even discussing, like, I know, different business ventures that they were going to do in the future, like all that cool stuff. It sounded really great, but of course, nothing ever materialized because all these quote unquote negotiations went nowhere. So I think they were all a smokescreen because every single time it seemed to me that when the United States and the Russians met together without the Europeans and without the Ukrainians, they always came to some sort of mutually satisfactory agreement. Yes, because afterwards they always said, yeah, it was great, we discussed things and we agreed on so many things, like bright future ahead. But then for some reason, every single time, the Trump administration always thought it's necessary to then hand the agreements to the Europeans to get their opinion. And of course, the Europeans never liked it. They said, no, no, we don't like it. This has to be changed. That has to be modified. And they demanded modifications. And the modifications, of course, were always completely unacceptable to the Russian side. And the Europeans knew it. And the Americans knew it. So the Europeans sabotaged every single negotiations between the Russians and the Americans. And I think the Americans also knew it. I mean, the Trump administration must have known that allowing the Europeans to modify the agreement that they made with the Russians would totally derail it. They must have known this. They did it anyway every single time, which tells me that they were never serious about it, about these peace negotiations. And throughout the whole process, they still supported Ukraine militarily and strategically with information. Yes. And
yeah, and when you think about how Trump, he talks big about wanting peace with Russia, but he still he set up this new Pearl initiative. So under Pearl, he's still providing weaponry to Ukraine, and he's still providing intelligence to Ukraine. And you, in a way, you can understand why the Russians and the several European states have bad blood. That was a reason why it was always a bad idea to have nations like Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia in NATO, because these countries have been fighting it out for centuries. So when you now bring them in under the umbrella of NATO, and that bad blood bubbles, and they want to go at each other's throats again, now we all become involved, and it becomes a global conflagration with nuclear powers.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think another problem that I see is that the Russians, they very often draw red lines, they make threats, but then they never make good on the threats. Like they say, if this happens, then we'll respond. But then it happens and they never really respond, which then, of course, makes the West think, and rightfully so, in my opinion, that the Russians aren't serious. And that's why they keep continuing attacking Russia with British missiles, with American missiles, British weapons, American weapons, because the Russians, they never really retaliate. And it seems to me the West is not really afraid of Russia anymore, because the West thinks there are no consequences, because so far there have been no consequences. I think it's not the same with Iran, because now, I mean, actually, to be honest, I was quite surprised at how Iran reacted like a month ago after it was attacked by the United States and Israel, because last year when Iran was attacked, it was a very disappointing performance on the Iranian side, because I think they sent these like slow motion drones to Israel that took like, I don't know, several hours or to reach the target, and most of them were shot down. They bombed some American base, but gave like a 24-hour warning to the Americans beforehand. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Because but now, I mean, none of this happened this time. I mean, they hit back with force. I mean, we don't even know the level of destruction that the Iranians unleashed in the region on the American assets, because everything is being censored by the mainstream media and the Americans and even the satellite companies. Yes, I mean, we don't really know how many American soldiers died. We don't know the real casualty numbers. We don't know how many civilians in Israel died. We don't know the enormity of destructions in Israel and the Arab states, the American bases. But I think it is much bigger than the Americans and the Israelis are letting on, because the Iranians are very, very serious this time. Very serious. And I think it took the West by surprise, because they didn't expect this.
Yeah, I think it was the United Arab Emirates. I might be wrong, that they've arrested more than 1,500 people for filming.
Yes, I also read this. Yeah. Israel the same. Yes.
Yeah.
They don't want this footage out, because I mean, it would tell a whole different story than the world is aware of at the moment. And so Iranians are very, very serious right now, and I think it's because it's an existential war for them. I mean, it is a like I said, it's a state civilization. It's an ancient civilization. It's thousands of years old. It is the ethnos of the Iranian people that is now under attack. And I think that even the so-called protesters, the people that protested against the Iranian government, a lot of them are now on the side of the government because they see that the existential enemy is the external enemy, the United States and Israel, because they actually want to wipe out Iranian civilization. I mean, Trump said so himself, and therefore it has become an existential war for them. And I think this is why they're acting with such ferocity. At the moment, they have nothing to lose.
Sorry for interrupting, but you could see the benefit for the United States in the destruction of not just Iranian energy, but the energy facilities in the Gulf. Because if those facilities are destroyed out of operation for years, then the United States becomes one of the two most important poles in energy provision for the entire world.
But there are a lot of American assets, though, with these energy companies in the Middle East that would be affected by it, and also the oil price would be affected by it. And even though the United States is energy independent, it would still have to deal with rising energy prices within the United States. I mean, the gas prices have risen dramatically, not just in Europe, but in the United States as well. And a lot of people are pissed off about it in America. And you well know, this is what the average person really only cares about. It's his wallet. He doesn't really care what's happening several thousand miles away, like, civilian suffering, damage to American bases. It doesn't affect him personally. What affects him is money that he has to spend, and the less money he has, the more he cares.
And what you're saying there, here is a clip of Colonel Douglas McGregor commenting on what you're alluding to.
I would say the following. First of all, if you need medication of any kind, you better go out and buy all the medicines you can get, because in a few months they won't be available, because the petroleum industry has a big role to play in the production of pharmaceuticals. So that's my first piece of advice. And secondly, start thinking in terms of storing food and any other items that you think you may need, because as this war continues, and it's going to continue, the impact that I talked about earlier is going to be felt here. There is no evidence that anybody in Tehran is going to pop up on the phone, call President Trump and say, "Oh, we're so sorry, we surrender. We'll do whatever the Israelis want us to do," because that's really what it's all about. Now, we have other interests. We think we're harming China.
Yeah. Does that play okay for you?
Yeah.
So, he was alluding to how it's going to affect medications and,
Well, there are lots of things. I mean, there are a lot of sectors affected, right? Also, like fertilizers, for example, like farmers are affected by it. I mean, lots of sectors, supply chains in general. As he said, if it continues, the war, it will totally wreak havoc on the world economy. I mean, including the American economy. And the average American will definitely feel the effects. I mean, he's already feeling the effects right now. I mean, I talk to my friends in the US all the time, and they're complaining like now, like a tank of gas is like 40% more than it was before the conflict already. Yes. And they're not happy about it, obviously.
Yeah, especially if you're living in a state such as California, where it's already very high to begin with.
Exactly.
You're an author of several books, such as, I think, is it The Esoteric Trump?
Yes, Esoteric Trumpism.
Esoteric Trumpism, yes. And, there were a lot of questions I wanted to ask in regards to your views of Trump and the geopolitical state of affairs and how his position is affecting, the globe today. And, it's kind of strange because I've seen how your views have changed now, because I watched a couple of episodes that you were in, a couple of podcasts you were in, to prep for this show, and you've changed your views. So a lot of the things I wanted to ask you, and even ask you in regards to your books, I've had to just improv now. So
Well, yeah, sorry about
one
that.
thing,
You know,
one thing I remember, and I wanted to ask you, you said that you don't consider Europe to be part of the true West anymore. Why is it?
well, I wouldn't say that. Well, yeah, back then, my argument was because after
You've
Trump
not
was
changed your
elected.
view
Yeah,
on that.
no. Well, I mean, I still, I think it's still valid to some extent. Yes, because, well, the argument that I made was because of the victory of MAGA, the victory of Trump. You had a sort of paradigm shift in the United States because before that, uh, the United States was dominated by woke liberalism. And the victory of Trump sort of defeated liberalism. And you could sort of see a massive cultural change going on in the United States, both in entertainment industry with like movies, TV series, even shopping centers like Walmart that removed all the gay propaganda, all the rainbow flags, for example. And also more patriotic movies, less sort of DEI forced diversity in movies. So I was very optimistic. I thought this was a sort of rejuvenating West in the United States, a sort of like Western Renaissance back to a more traditional set of values that had long ago been abandoned by liberalism was now returning to the forefront. And I looked at it very, very positively. And I was in the United States several times over the last 2 years in different states on different occasions. And I myself, like just from personal experience, uh, felt this change all around me when I interacted with people and moving around the environment there. I mean, I could really sense a palpable transformation for the better. And since I live in Europe now, I cannot say the same about Europe because with the victory of MAGA in the United States and the return of more traditional values, I think to some extent, the United States was out of the liberal camp, while before it was the leader of the liberal camp. So, who's the leader of the liberal camp now? Well, I would argue it's Germany. Uh, Within the European Union, I mean, the European Union as a whole, and Germany as the most powerful player within the European Union is now the headquarters of Global Homo, because here liberalism, wokeism is still rampant and wholeheartedly endorsed by the government, the media, the establishment, and a sizable percentage of citizens. Not really sure how many, but quite a few, I would argue, just from. I mean, this I gather from interacting with people here. So, and that was my argument. That's why my argument was that America has become the true West again because of MAGA, because having returned to more conservative and traditional values, while Western Europe was still sort of trapped in this liberal mindset. And to be honest, like I don't really see Europe moving out of this mindset, I mean, anytime soon, even though there are some sort of signs that there sort of will be a struggle between a sort of like European MAGA movement trying to assert itself and the liberal establishment. I mean, you already have the I would say the first phase of this going on right now with the consolidation of patriotic parties like the Alternative for Germany in Germany, with Le Pen's party in France, even though Le Pen herself is not allowed to run to run as president, but it's still very, very powerful. And we can see that a lot of Europeans are quite sick of the liberal state of affairs, but it's not the majority. I mean, for example, the AfD in Germany is now at about, I think, 25 or 26% approval rating, which makes it the strongest party according to the latest polls, it's not the strongest party in terms of power, just in terms of approval right now, according to polls, right? So it's like 26, I think 26% now. And the Christian Democratic Union, which is actually in power, is an approval rating of like, I think 24, 25%, just slightly behind the AFD. I mean, it is pretty good, like 26%. And I would say like the AFD voters are what I was sort of like the conservative people. I mean, they just want Germany, but a normal Germany. I mean, that's one of the AFD's campaign slogans: Germany, but normal, right?
Wasn't there a thing in regards to the AFD with many of their candidates falling ill and dying?
Yeah, but it's well, I mean, a lot of them are like really old and really sick, and this is why they died. I don't believe the conspiracy theory that somehow the state murdered them. I mean, I've never seen any credible evidence. I mean, I know the theory, I just don't see why the state would do it, because they would just be replaced by younger people anyway. So I don't think there's anything behind it, to be honest. Yes. And
So this thing about what we're talking about,
yeah, just let
culture
me,
and norms. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I just want to finish my thought real quick, because so if you have like the AFD at say 25%, which means 25%, I mean, 1 in every 4 Germans wants a normal Germany, but that means 75% don't want it. Yes, because in my opinion, Germany only has 2 parties. Like you have the AFD and you have all the other parties, because all the other parties are like one party. It's like the Unity Party, like in East Germany. I mean, on the surface, Germany has a multi-party system, but in reality, all the other parties are all the same. They say different things, but once they're in power, they do exactly the same. No difference whatsoever. So 75% of Germans like the status quo for some reason, or they accept it with this non-stop influx of non-European immigrants, the censorship, the hate speech laws, the denigration of their own culture and traditions, denigration of the ancestors. Somehow they're okay with it. And the 75% is the vast majority. It's not nearly as close as in the United States. In the United States, I mean, Trump even won the popular vote, which means literally the majority of Americans were behind the values that MAGA espoused.
What is the demographics in terms of the age breakdown? You know, like between like people aged 18 to 30 or 30 to 50 or 50 above. Has Germany got a lot of young demographic, or is it a country with a lot more, say, boomers and Gen Xers?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, demographically, Germany is in free fall, right? Because I mean, the it's way below replacement level. So of course, you have a lot more older people than younger people, because I mean, simply because not as many people are being born. But according to statistics, and I think it's the same in the United States, like more younger people embrace these traditional and conservative values than the boomers. And it's actually always the case with like AFD victories, especially in like East Germany, where the AFD is the strongest, and they always score much higher among like people in their 20s or early 30s or even early 40s than people in their 50s and 60s who are more prone to vote for the established parties. So
Why do you think that is, that the millennials and the Gen Z
right.
demographic, why is it, do you think they're more conservative leaning?
Yeah, I think the reason is quite obvious, because they have to live with the fruits of liberalism in schools, in universities, on the streets, while the boomers are very often just shielded from the effects of these policies behind closed doors. They don't really experience it themselves. I think young people are more out in the open, in the streets, interacting with the changed environment, and they simply don't like it because there's nothing to like about it.
Right. So this is more of a cultural thing for you, when you say that you feel that Europe has lost its place, or that Europe is no longer part of what we would call the true West. It's because of its cultural norms and values. It's not so much a racial or ethnic argument you're making, more of a cultural argument?
Well, to some extent, it's both. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, culturally speaking, I mean, it's in total disintegration, but ethnically as well. I mean, because both of them go hand in hand, the ethnos and the culture. Because I mean, the ethnically, all the European countries are being diluted, obviously, with a constant influx of non-European foreigners. I mean, you can see the demographic change happening in front of your eyes. I mean, it's much worse than it was only like 5 years ago. I mean, just when you walk around like certain cities in Europe, I mean, it's pretty much the same in Britain. I mean, to some extent, it's even worse in Britain than it is in Germany.
Yeah,
I think you cannot divorce the ethnic part from the cultural part, and vice versa. I think both of them are inextricably linked.
you see, this is what's very interesting to me, because the United States usually was experiencing somewhere between 1 million to 2 million migrants per year coming from the Mexican border, from South America into the United States. Now, if you're going by that argument that demography is destiny, and you're going to have a large Hispanic migration into the United States, that will change culture. Now, bearing in mind, Hispanics are quite conservative minded in their outlook. You know, it's got a lot of Catholics, Christians. Um, Maybe the reason that there is a growing sense of conservatism or traditionalism amongst the millennials or the Gen Zs is because a lot of them are Hispanic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even according to statistics, the majority of Hispanic men voted for Trump. And I don't want you to misunderstand me. I don't advocate some sort of ethnic purity in Europe or the United States, because in my opinion, that ship has sailed anyway. So, I mean, there was a good book published that I read a few years ago, a German book. It's called Das neue Volk, or in English, The New People. And I think the book pretty much sums up what I myself believe is basically argues that now the West, Western Europe, is in decline according to Oswald Spengler's prophecies. And Oswald Spengler was a German historian and philosopher who, in the 1920s, wrote the famous book called The Decline of the West. And he postulated that all cultures are like organisms. So they are born, they mature, they grow old, they wither, and they die. Yes, and it's completely inevitable. It's like a natural law. There's absolutely nothing that can prevent this from happening. And if a culture is already in old age, it turns into a civilization, because he sort of differentiates the two terms. Culture is something positive, vitalistic, full of energy, and civilization, when technology takes over, when everything becomes automatic and mechanized, so to speak. And if a culture turns into a civilization, meaning it's already old, it can never go back to its youthful phase. Just as an 80-year-old man cannot be 16 years old again. I mean, the 80-year-old man might pretend that he's 16, but he's not 16. He has certain limitations. And one of them is that he will die soon, probably. And even physically, he's not full of the same elan and spirit and vitality that he had in his youth. And it's the same with cultures. Once you're civilizations, that's it. It's downhill from there, and eventually they end, which means they die. And then, of course, you have a sort of transformation phase, because there's not, of course, not a vacuum. It's not like the culture dies and then there's nothing. Well, something immediately grows out of it. And in the book that I mentioned, The New People, he talks about the ancient Roman Empire. He, as an analogy to what's happening today, he says I mean, the right-wing people today in the West, they talk about remigration. We need to send back millions of like non-white people to their homelands. We need to make Europe ethnically sort of homogenous again. And in the book, the author, he argues this is a complete illusion. This will never happen. And I agree. I don't think it will happen. And he uses the analogy of the late Roman Empire. He says, even in the late Roman Empire, almost 2,000 years ago, it was almost the same scenario. I mean, Rome, the capital city of the empire, was only 20% ethnic Romans. 80% was, like, again, Arabs and Africans and people from other parts of the empire. And it's the same today, of course, in any Western city, that either in Europe or the United States. And he also said that in the late phase of the Roman Empire, they were also preaching the ideology of universalism. Like, what matters is humanity, it's mankind. It is not my own nation, my own ethnicity, or my own tribe, but it's everybody. It's universal mankind that needs to be saved. This is what it's like today in the West, because in the West today, you cannot say, I care about my race more than I care about other races, or I care about my nationality or ethnicity more than about others. It would be a complete no-no. It's completely taboo. It's always about saving the world, climate change, saving humanity as a whole. And it was the same in the late Roman Empire. These are signs of complete decadence, when all the ties have been cut that humans had to something that is above them. The community, ethnicity, gender, all of this is cut, because now, I mean, you can import a person from Africa into Germany. He gets a German passport. Like a couple of months later, he will be considered as German, as a German that can trace his ancestry back 10 generations. There's no difference is being made. He's legally German, and people will accept him as German. But this is a complete unique Western phenomenon. Nobody would do this in China. Nobody would say that if I move to China and then I get a Chinese passport like a year later, nobody would accept me as Chinese. Even with a Chinese, it would be weird. But in the West, it's considered completely normal. So it's because the West is in decline and China is not. So there's no affinity to one's tribe, to one's ethnicity, one's race anymore. People don't have it anymore. It's lost. And it's almost the same with gender now, because it doesn't matter. Man, woman, it's all the same, yeah, or something else, transgender, whatever, right? And then now you have transhumanism. Soon it won't even matter if you're human anymore. So Spengler says that basically we are moving back to a very primitive type of humanity, where it's only about the individual and the survival of yourself against everybody else, basically. But there's no real collective anymore that you feel that you're a part of, that you could even sacrifice yourself to. All of this is gone, that feeling. Mostly gone. I mean, some people, of course, still have it, but definitely not the majority. This is why, like today, if you have like these conservative politicians or right-wing ideologues that speak about like save the white race, or I don't know, save the ethnic Germans from dilution, I think it's a hopeless case, because you cannot make this case anymore with a majority. People will not understand it, especially the younger generation, like my children, because I look at their classrooms, and of course there are lots of non-Europeans, and for them it's completely normal because they grew up in this environment. So I would say I'm more fatalistic. I sort of accept it because it cannot be changed anyway. I don't even get angry about it. I'm not like emotional or anything about this state of affairs, because this is simply the way it is. So, and again, I want to go really quickly go back to this book that I mentioned, The New People. So he uses the analogy of the Roman Empire, which is quite apt. And then, of course, the Roman Empire died. It was finished. Yes, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. But then he mentions the Venetian Republic. And the Venetian Republic was a really powerful state, and it lasted almost 1,000 years. It was not a continuation of the Roman Empire, it was its own thing. It took certain elements from Rome, but overall it was its own organism. So in the book, he makes the argument that this is what will likely happen in the West. So the West will fall. It cannot be prevented because the life cycle has finished, and it's just the way it is. But then, of course, again, there's no vacuum. Something else will come, but it will not be a continuation of the West. It will not be a renaissance of the West. It will be something completely different. It might take elements from the West, but it will also take elements from non-Western sources, simply because you already have millions of non-Westerners in the West with their own traditions, religions, and philosophies. All of this will be integrated, will be a sort of synthesis. It will not be the white West, it will not be homogeneous, it will be something else. And this is what we can work for, and this is what we should work for, because that's the only realistic scenario. Not to save the West, to save something that cannot be saved, but to look forward to what comes after the West and help to build it.
So what is it that you seek to build after the collapse of the West?
Well, I supported Trump, for example, back then, the MAGA movement. I support the AFD. I support all these like patriotic movement for pragmatic reasons, because in my opinion, these can form the nucleus of what comes after. And it is not restricted to, I would say, ethnic Europeans, because like I said, what will come after will be something different. But we don't know yet, and it might take several generations, because the fall of a civilization is not from one day to the next. I mean, even the decline and fall of the Roman Empire took hundreds of years. So, I mean, this state of affairs can last another couple of hundred years. So I will probably not even see it, and neither will you. Not possibly, not even my children. But at some point, I think it is just an optimistic expectation. Of course, it doesn't have to happen like this, that something will emerge, some new cultural organism that will resist this globalization machine. This is what I'm hoping for, in my optimism. But of course, it doesn't have to come to pass. It can also.
When you say a globalization machine, you don't desire the homogenization of all cultures into one pulp. You would like to see a distinction between Indian culture, Russian culture, whatever we're going to call American culture, because America's quite a young nation. It's only like 250 years old, So does America even have its culture? If it does, is it truly rooted? Can we truly call it culture? We've got African culture. So you're seeking a distinction, a separation from these ancient cultures, and you do not desire the homogenization into one globalized cultural entity that sort of erodes the very notion of culture. It just becomes a sea of disparate individuation. It's
agree. Yes. So ideally, I would like to see distinct cultures, to remain distinct and pursue their own path. I mean, ideally, I would like to see separation of cultures and not a homogenization where everything, like according to the American melting pot theory, is thrown into one pot and mixed together. So we have the everyman. So, I mean, this is a really dystopian scenario. But of course, this is a scenario that might likely come to pass. We don't know. But I'm trying to resist this scenario coming to pass, and together with people like Alexander Dugin that are also fighting against this, and many people on the right and also people on the left that are trying to resist this, because it is not beneficial for humanity.
Is it more important for you to resist this psychologically in a personal sense, or in terms of supporting institutions and organizations to resist it?
I think both. Well, I think both on a personal sense, because I think the world is simply more beautiful if you have a world of true diversity with diverse cultures and diverse ideas, diverse philosophies, and diverse peoples. Also, I think it is beneficial for the world as a whole, personally, because if you have different cultures with their own distinct philosophies and ideas, then you also have a myriad of solutions to certain problems that might emerge in the future, problems that will affect the whole world. But if you have different solutions or ideas for solutions, it is obviously better for humanity to survive rather than to have like one homogenized mass with only, I don't know, one possibility that might not even work. And I support, I mean, so I just think aesthetically, because essentially, I mean, I've always been a poet, an artist, basically, like a writer. So I have these artistic sensibilities. So aesthetically, I find this diversity more beautiful when I travel and I go to different cultures. I don't want to see the same thing that I have at home. Like, why would I even want to go then? Yes,
Yeah.
you know. And I think, um, and I can bring Russia as an example in with the sanctions and what's happening with the Ukraine conflict and how it has affected Russia, because I've lived in Russia. I lived in Russia for 12 years, and I still go back like several times a year because I have family and friends there, and I love it. It's great. I love the Russian people. I love the Russian culture. I mean, mentally, they're very, very close to me, much closer than my own compatriots. And I think the sanctions have had a positive effect on Russia in terms of culture, because before the conflict, when you walked around Moscow or any other, I mean, city in Russia, it was the same like everywhere. You had all these billboards with Marvel movies, Avengers, and like American music, and totally Americanized, westernized. But all of this is gone, because when you go to Moscow now, like to any like large cinema, for example, they will have like 10 movies playing, for example, but all of them will be Russian movies, children's movies, science fiction movies, action, and some of them quite good actually. And it's the same with restaurants. I mean, you don't have McDonald's anymore, you don't have Starbucks anymore. They have their own franchises, but more closely connected to their own traditions. They like use their own cartoon characters, maybe from Soviet times, to advertise like the Happy Meal instead of Mickey Mouse, And I think this is a very positive aspect of the sanctions. So, and again, this is like going back to what I said earlier with Faust and Mephistopheles, always trying to do bad, punish the Russians with the sanctions, but then you have these like really positive results. And it's the same with Iran. They wanted to crush Iran, a sovereign civilization state. Instead, they've made it much stronger. And I think it will emerge victorious in the end. So
Well,
I'm quite optimistic that multipolarity will win.
yeah. Do you know what? I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. I don't know who it was that once said, I care not, as long as I have control of the financial system, I care not for who writes the laws. And sometimes I think the whole malleability of the human mind, and that's sort of reflected in culture. It's always in flux, it's always changing, and it's always going to change. And regardless, I don't know how to frame it as good or bad, because when I think back personally to how I was as a kid, say just 15 years old, I thought I knew things. I thought I had it summed up. And then, fast forward 10 years when I'm 25, I thought I figured it out and I had it all summed up. And then when I'm 35, it all changed again. I thought I had it figured out. I thought I had it summed up. And I didn't. And my views kept on evolving. I kept changing. And so does the culture around me. And so I'm just struggling to frame things in terms of what is good, what is evil, because it's always in flux and we're getting bombarded. It's propagated everywhere. Norms and values that are a threat to your own psyche, to your own health. And it's messing up our perceptions of not only a sense of what is moral and what is justice, but what is even reality. And we need that root. We need to be rooted. I think culture needs to have that root to survive. And I don't see any cultures in the West rooted deep enough to survive the coming decades. But I just hope that we can all somehow survive through it and benefit in our own personal spiritual way.
Well, I completely agree with you, and that's, I mean, when you're talking about the West, especially Western Europe, I mean, it really does not have a future in terms of remaining a rooted society. I think the future is in the East, like in Russia and China specifically. These are the societies that now embrace a sort of archaeo-futurist vision, meaning that they have sort of embraced their own traditions again, and their own traditions are becoming stronger and stronger in their respective countries. There's a sort of resurgence, while at the same time welcoming technological change, not rejecting it. So you have these traditional societies, but also highly futuristic societies. I mean, you can look at the videos on X or other social media. I mean, what's going on in China is like a science fiction movie.
Beijing and Shanghai, it's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, but these societies are the future. I mean, in Western Europe, everything's falling apart. Literally, like public transportation, nothing really works anymore. There's no real vision anymore, because everything is really abstract in the West. It's all about the rights of the individual, like the right to change your gender, I don't know, the right to import more immigrants and all that. But there's no sense of community. There's no sense of belonging anymore. I mean, even if you wanted a sense of belonging, like in Germany, like belong to what? There's no I mean, I don't feel any loyalty to this German state, to this current incarnation of Germany, because it represents the complete opposite of what I believe in. So I don't feel loyal to the values or the ideas that it propagates at all. So, but I don't think it's the same. It's the same in Russia, because, as I said, when I speak to people in Russia, I'm almost always in complete agreement with their views, and most of them, feel extreme loyalty to their society, to their people, to their ethnos. Yes. And I think it's the same in China. And this is why these societies have a future and Western Europe does not. With America, it's a bit more ambiguous. And I do believe that America, the United States, has an authentic culture. I mean, there are dozens of examples I could mention, like great writers, William Faulkner, H.P. Lovecraft, the American Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, I mean, really great stuff.
Oh man, I just what you say, Lovecraft, and I just read The Shadow over Innsmouth.
Oh, great.
I read it for like the third time. I've read Lovecraft several, lots of his stuff. But yeah, I just picked up A Shadow over Innsmouth for some reason a couple of nights ago, and I was like,
Masterpiece.
oh, this is that and The Color Out of Space.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's real. I mean, I even put flowers on his grave once in Providence, Rhode Island. And by the way, I just published a new book. It just came out today on Amazon, called The Fate of White America. And there's a whole chapter about Shadow over Innsmouth, actually, in that book.
Right.
Because I compare like these fish people in Shadow over Innsmouth to the demographic change in the United States today. Yes, to how the founding stock of the United States is being submerged, basically. Yes, I mean, because that's what's happening. And
do you know? Have you ever read the Dunwich by Peter Levenda?
I have not.
It's his sequel to Lovecraft's.
Because Lovecraft wrote the Dunwich Horror, the story, right?
Yeah. But this is a sequel to the whole Cthulhu thing.
Okay, no, I have not read it. I would like to read it.
Yeah. It's an awesome book. I actually just got it delivered today, so I'm going to need to give it a read. But Constantine,
I'll send you my new book also.
Yeah, totally. I'd be glad to read that. So again, I've just checked. We've been doing this for about 2 hours, so I think we'll wrap it up here. But before we go, if there's anything you would like to promote or tell the audience about.
Yeah, sure. So I am the director and founder of Multipolar Press, the new publishing company, and we publish a variety of books, plus fiction, non-fiction. I mentioned some of them earlier in the show. Just today, we published my new book called The Fate of White America, where I talk about some of the issues that you and I have been discussing in this podcast in more detail. Also, as I said, The Shadow over Innsmouth, H.P. Lovecraft. I talk about Wyndham Lewis's book Paleface, Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs' cut-up technique, again, Oswald Spengler, Julius Evola's views on America, and Madison Grant, Lothrop Stoddard. And basically, I present the face of white America and how it has changed over time and what its prospective future might be. And I also have an online journal, multipolarpress.com, which I manage. And we publish, I know, 1 or 2 articles per day, again, by a variety of authors. The most prominent one is probably Alexander Dugin. So we publish a lot of his articles exclusively in English on multipolarpress.com. But again, lots of writers, not just from the West, but also from Asia, Africa, pretty much from all over the world. Then I have my own personal Substack called eurosiberia.net, on which I only publish my own articles, usually, again, 1 or 2 per week, about philosophy, literature, movies, politics, usually from a philosophical perspective. Yeah, I should check it out. And yeah, so I wrote 3 books. We talked about one, Esoteric Trumpism, which was published in 2024. My second book was Multipolarity, ! Published 1 year later in 2025. Then 4 months ago, I published Multipolar Galaxy. Talked about it again earlier, my book about Star Wars and how it's connected to what's going on in the world today. And now, my latest book, The Fate of White America. Thank you.
Constantine, it's been an interesting conversation. Thanks for coming on.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
And I believe you accepted the invitation to come on to my next panel debate.
Absolutely,
So
definitely.
so I'll probably see you next on that episode. It'll probably be around a week or 2.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. Well, God knows what kind of world we're gonna live in a week or 2.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll see you then, and it's been great speaking to you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, of course. And we'll be if you don't, I mean, if you want, you can send me your mailing address, and I'll send you the book right now.
Yeah. Okay. I'll speak to you after the show.
Yeah. Let's. By the way, are you on Telegram or just X?
No, I'm just on X. I'm not using Telegram.
Okay. All right. Doesn't matter. Oh, we'll talk on X then about everything else. Right.
No problem.
Again, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Yeah,
all right. Cheers. Okay. Bye-bye.
And that was an interesting discussion with Constantine von Hoffmeister. So I recommend you check his stuff out. It's very interesting. And yeah, I enjoyed that. Next week, we are going in a completely different direction with a guest I was actually supposed to have on last week, but it's been delayed. That is Frater Eleftheria, and that will be on the occult connections between UAPs and Enochian magic. And the week after that, as I alluded to, it will be another panel debate, and that will be on Trump and the war, probably with Constantine as a guest. So just remember, people, we live in a crazy, chaotic world, and there are a lot of people out there willingly spreading that chaos. So don't you be one, and everybody be cool. You be cool. I'll catch you later.
Gold pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quarks. Get a Ractagino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel. Yeah, it just depends how you feel. Gold pressed platinum, you know it's a gas. Morn vomits it up into a tiny little glass. Liquid platinum, more you amass. Better than bronze, cobalt, silver, nickel or brass. Silver, nickel or brass.